Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. Now, arguably, this is the people's main event, and rightly so. Give props where props are due. Michael Chandler is one of the most exciting fighters on the UFC roster. He brings entertainment every single time. And Tony Ferguson, he is no different. Whether it's in his press conferences or whether it's in his fights, whatever fight it is throughout his career, he brings entertainment, he brings drama, he brings chaos. So, this is a real head-to-head car collision. Now, everywhere that I've been looking for picks, for breakdowns, for verdicts, I've been seeing so much about Michael Chandler. So I'm going to paint a story here, and I'm going to paint a narrative, not only to play devil's advocate a little, but to provide a narrative in the media that I haven't seen yet, and which I think is rightly deserved, because a 4-1 betting underdog for Tony Ferguson in this fight is criminal. Now, yes, that goes to say that I've chucked a few quid on him. Rightly so. The same way that I won money against Dean Barry the other day. Because a 7-1 underdog is ridiculous. And when that man's Tony Ferguson in a 3-round fight against Michael Chandler, you have to take some of my money. And let me tell you why. Of course, the narrative going into this is going to be Tony is way past the hill. He's 38. We've seen all the damage he's taken. The Justin Gaethje fight was his most recent. Obviously, the mishaps with Khabib and the weight cuts and the trauma of how many fights he's had in this company and how many wars of attrition he's had. He's lost multiple times in a row. He's done. He's not winning a fight. But then, we think about Michael Chandler. Now, Michael Chandler does an incredible job of making it seem and making you believe he's doing a lot more than he is. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I don't even mean that in a disrespectful way. Michael Chandler has really clawed his way to his position. He deserves every big payday, every big event he gets, and he deserves all the plaudits for that. But when we actually look at Michael Chandler on cold, hard facts and paper, what makes him a 4-1 underdog in this? I went back and watched the Justin Gaethje fight because I heard Justin Gaethje say, like I mentioned earlier in the video, that Michael Chandler barely landed a shot. So I went and watched it back, and he didn't. He really didn't. He had a good first round. He hurt him a couple of times, but even the back end of that round was really favouring to Justin Gaethje, and he was landing some big shots. After that, as I mentioned earlier, he lost both rounds very convincingly and barely anything got through. Even flying knees and the likes of that, they were just grazing off the guard of which Justin Gaethje had shelled up. So I wasn't necessarily impressed by that. We've obviously seen him be stopped by the champion. Now, we go back and we think about Tony Ferguson's fights. Yes, he had that fight with Justin Gaethje, which at times was competitive and landed, I would argue, a lot more shots and damage than Michael Chandler actually did if you go back and watch the fights. Now, I know that we saw that stopped late in that fight, but I believe that would have been the same case with Michael Chandler if that went any longer. Do you honestly think that he could have taken those shots with his hands down by his waist, tired, with lazy output for 2 more rounds? I don't think so. Then we have a look at him against the champion, a fight that he took on short notice, that he said and mentioned he didn't train any jiu-jitsu for that fight. Now, of course, we know he has great jiu-jitsu. He's trained his whole life. But if you're coming up against the submission expert that is Charlie Olives, you have someone in your camp relentlessly trying to snap your arm off and tear your neck off. That is just how it goes. So, did he get stopped there? No, he didn't. Now I'm starting to go back on the fights and think not only has Tony Ferguson literally fought Charles Olives, Beneil Dariush, Justin Gaethje, all of which you could argue should be the champion or fight for the championship or should be near or round about that belt. Now we think about Michael Chandler and how he likes to fight. He likes to get in dogfights. That was his problem against Justin Gaethje. If he finished the fight how he started it, pumping out the jab, nice footwork, throwing that right hand, mixing up the level changes, playing it smart, entering the range when he needed to, we could be looking at him fighting for a title very shortly. But he doesn't ever do that, and that's why he falls short, and that's why I believe he falls short of that upper echelon. His game planning and his fight IQ is not where it needs to be, I think, personally, to be a champion. We look at Charlie Olives. I think there he got excited because of the damage he'd done in the first round, And then we saw how that ended. And I think with Justin Gaethje, he didn't need to enter that fight. And I think that's going to happen with Tony Ferguson. I don't think he's going to be able to stop him within 3 rounds. I really don't. I don't think a lot of people can stop Tony Ferguson within 3 rounds. And the amount of finishes that Charlie Olives has on his record, and the fact that he couldn't stop him, even with that armbar, goes to show how tough he is. But we know that. So, is Michael Chandler going to be able to land shots? Yes. Tony Ferguson has a problem of leaving his head on centre line, and also with the mindset he knows that he can eat a couple of shots. So he will land. He will land a big overhand right. He will land an uppercut. He will likely buckle, hurt, noticeably wither Tony Ferguson. Yes. But that is when you are at your weakest point if you are Michael Chandler, if you enter that conversation. If you enter the dogfight, if you enter the thought of trying to put Tony Ferguson out and get him outside the octagon, a man that's on a losing streak, a man that's been away from the media, he's been away from fighting for a year. Excuse me, he's replenished possibly physically and mentally from his recent fight. Now we have a look at what Michael Chandler had recently. He had a war with Justin Gaethje not that long ago. How much has that impacted him? Now I know that we've seen that with Tony Ferguson, and of course that is a factor. But that was over a year ago. That's a long time. So does that now come into play? Now does Michael Chandler start having an ego fight once again with Tony? Because if he does, we know that Tony's got hard hands. He has blunt elbows and blunt hands, forearms. He's nasty. He's got bony knees, and he's going to cut you and he's going to open you up. And once Michael Chandler sees that blood and he's got that gushing in his face and there's 20,000 people on their feet screaming because there's a back and forth war, and we're seeing this pure entertainer that we see come out of Michael Chandler, which we always see under the biggest occasion. Yes, that makes him a fan favourite, but yes, that makes him susceptible to losing big fights. And if you get in that with Tony, that isn't going to end well, I don't think, for Michael Chandler. And I think he does have a very good opportunity to win. Not only on points, which I think is an outside 7.5 to 1 bet, but I think he could even nick a submission, which I believe is something along 10 to 1, which is crazy. Or 15 to 1, which the more I think about, the more I'll have to put money on it. Because we saw him against the Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, and he was in a position when he was tortoising on his front, where he'd been hurt, where he'd shot a sloppy shot because he'd been hurt. He was clutching onto a single leg, and he was susceptible to Darcy's and Anacondas and all those front chokes and guillotines, and Tony Ferguson will snatch that up. We saw Justin Gaethje didn't want to entertain that, but Tony Ferguson will jump on that opportunity. So can I see a situation in there's a clinch and Tony lands a horrible elbow that cuts him across the top of the eye and then maybe digs in a knee? Michael Chandler goes for a shot. He sprawls his hip backs and locks up a guillotine. I can see that. I can see that in the 3rd round after, like I said, a war of attrition. So a 4 to 1 bet is an incredible bet on my books. So that's what I'm going for. I'm going Tony Ferguson here. Now, of course, this isn't a confident pick. Now, of course, we can see Michael Chandler, like I said, stay bouncy, in and out of range, have a game plan, take a win and move up. But I think in the back of his head, he doesn't want to do that. And he knows he's not going to do that at any point in his career. We haven't seen it thus far, and we've seen 29 professional fights. So what makes me think he's going to do this with one of the most wild men ever that I know he loves to have on his resume? And I know more than anything, he'll just love to have that scrap. And he won't be thinking in the moment whether he's going to get the win or whether he takes a less exciting decision. So my money's going on Tony. Of course, Michael Chandler's got every possibility with his athleticism and his strength and his endurance and his resilience to win this fight. But I'm going Tony.